For years, a loyal housekeeper cared for a mansion steeped in tradition and silence. But everything changed when the heir's new wife began a cruel plan to erase the matriarch's presence. What seemed like mere coldness soon revealed itself to be a dark conspiracy capable of destroying the entire family. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. A light May rain fell over the gardens of the mansion on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, creating a silver curtain that blurred the colonial-style windows. Marlene watched from the spacious kitchen, her calloused but careful hands holding a cup of coffee that was already growing cold. 20 years, 2 whole decades dedicated to that family, to that imposing 3-story townhouse where she knew every room, every creak of a door, every story held within the walls, covered in old portraits. She still remembered her first day, arriving shy and scared, a young woman of just 22 from a small town in Ohio, carrying only a worn-out suitcase and an address scribbled on a crumpled piece of paper. It was Mrs. Eleanor who opened the door that winter morning, with her warm smile and eyes that conveyed a genuine kindness. The matriarch of the Caldwell family didn't treat her like a servant, but as someone who deserved respect and dignity. From then on, the bond between them strengthened, transforming a professional relationship into something much deeper, almost maternal. Marlene sighed, setting the cup down on the marble countertop. Things had changed drastically in the last 6 months. Veronica's arrival had turned everything upside down, like a hurricane tearing through a house that had been meticulously organized for decades. The young woman of just 28, a blonde with light eyes and a practiced smile, had won over Ryan with terrifying speed. The Caldwell heir, always so deliberate and dedicated to the family business, seemed to have completely lost his mind when he met that woman at a charity gala at the Museum of Modern Art. The courtship was a whirlwind. 3 months later, Ryan announced their engagement during a formal dinner, leaving everyone stunned. Mrs. Eleanor tried to hide her concern, but Marlene knew every expression of the woman she considered almost a mother. She saw the tightness at the corner of her lips, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she held her silver fork. Beatrice, the Caldwell's younger daughter, also didn't hide her discomfort, exchanging meaningful glances with her mother throughout the dinner. But Ryan was bewitched. There was no other word for it. He, who had always been so discerning in his choices, so meticulous in business, seemed to have abandoned all critical sense when it came to Veronica. He spoke of her with his eyes shining, like a teenager in love for the first time, completely ignoring the subtle signs everyone around him noticed. The way Veronica's behavior changed when he wasn't looking, the calculated way she touched his arm, how she tilted her head when she spoke, how her eyes lost their sparkle when she talked to anyone else in the family. The wedding took place on a sunny March afternoon in a historic church on Park Avenue. Marlene still remembered every detail of that day that should have been a celebration, but was instead marked by an unsettling sense of apprehension. Veronica was stunning in her French lace gown, with a veil that trailed for yards, but it was her behavior that left everyone disconcerted. Mrs. Eleanor, always elegant and discreet, had chosen a royal blue silk dress for the occasion. She was emotional, as any mother would be seeing her son get married. But Veronica treated her with a cutting coldness from the morning on. She didn't allow her mother-in-law in the main family photos, claiming she only wanted pictures of the couple and the wedding party. She suggested, with a sweet smile but eyes as hard as stone, that Mrs. Eleanor sit in the back pews of the church, with the staff and distant acquaintances. Marlene saw the pain in the matriarch's eyes, but Mrs. Eleanor said nothing. She just nodded with dignity and walked to the back of the church, holding her head high even with a broken heart. Ryan, busy with preparations and completely immersed in the happiness of his big day, noticed nothing, or perhaps he didn't want to notice. During the ceremony, Sophia, Beatrice's 6-year-old daughter, was enchanting in her pink flower girl dress. The little girl adored her grandmother and didn't understand why she was sitting so far away. In the middle of the service, while the priest was still speaking about the wedding vows, Sophia slipped from her mother's hand and ran down the center aisle, her little white shoes tapping on the church's marble floor. She threw herself into Mrs. Eleanor's arms with the pure spontaneity of children, hugging her grandmother tightly. The moment should have been touching, but Veronica turned her head sharply, her usually serene face contorted in a poorly disguised expression of fury. As soon as the ceremony ended, she walked over to Beatrice with firm steps, her heels echoing menacingly. She spoke quietly, but Marlene was close enough to hear the sharp words delivered, with a fake smile for anyone watching from a distance. "Make it very clear to your daughter that she needs to learn how to behave at important events. I don't want to see any more of these melodramatic scenes. Mrs. Eleanor is old enough to know her place in this family, and you should know yours too." Beatrice turned pale, but she had no chance to respond. Veronica had already turned away, walking back to Ryan with a radiant smile, as if nothing had happened. Marlene felt a chill run down her spine. That woman was not what she seemed. Behind the stunning beauty and the sweet words she used with Ryan, there was something deeply disturbing, a calculated coldness that made anyone uncomfortable. In the days following the wedding, the situation only worsened. Veronica took complete control of the mansion. She rearranged all the decor, replacing antique furniture that had been in the family for generations with modern, impersonal pieces. She swapped the portraits on the walls for abstract paintings that no one understood. She fired 3 longtime staff members under flimsy claims that the house needed a younger, fresher feel. But the worst was what she did to Mrs. Eleanor. The matriarch, who had always occupied the master suite on the 2nd floor, that spacious room with a balcony overlooking the garden of ancient oak trees, was subtly displaced. Veronica convinced Ryan that the couple needed that space, that it was only natural for the newlyweds to have the best room in the house. She said she had prepared a special room for her mother-in-law, a cozy place where she would have more privacy and tranquility. The room in question was a converted storage room on the 3rd floor, small and stuffy, with a single window that looked out onto the back wall. Mrs. Eleanor accepted the move in silence without complaint, but Marlene saw the sadness in her eyes every time she climbed the stairs to that claustrophobic room. The matriarch, who had always been the heart of that home, was being systematically isolated, pushed away from family life, turned into an inconvenient presence that needed to be hidden. Veronica also began to control Mrs. Eleanor's meals. She claimed her mother-in-law had health problems and needed a restricted diet, although there was never any medical diagnosis to confirm this. The portions were small and tasteless, served at irregular times. Marlene tried a few times to sneak food to the matriarch, but Veronica always found out, reprimanding the housekeeper with polite words but threatening eyes. "You need to understand that you're here to follow my orders, Marlene. I know you have a special affection for Mrs. Eleanor, but I am the lady of this house now. If you can't adapt to the new rules, perhaps it would be best to look for another job. I'm sure that at your age, and after so many years in the same place, it can't be easy to start over somewhere else, can it?" The threat was clear. Marlene was 52 with few options in the job market and no close family in New York. That house was all she had, but at the same time she couldn't accept what was happening to Mrs. Eleanor. The woman who had always treated her with dignity and respect was wasting away before her eyes, losing weight, losing her spark, becoming a shadow of her former self. Ryan seemed completely oblivious to all of this. He spent his days absorbed in business, traveled constantly for meetings in other cities, and when he was home he only had eyes for Veronica. She knew exactly how to keep him enchanted, always with affectionate words, always attentive, always available. The man was so wrapped up that he didn't even notice his mother's absence at family meals, didn't notice that Mrs. Eleanor barely left her room on the 3rd floor, didn't see how the mansion had completely lost the warmth of a home it had always had. Beatrice, on the other hand, was growing more and more concerned. She lived in a nearby apartment with her daughter Sophia, and her visits to the mansion had become tense. Veronica always found excuses to prevent her from going up to her mother's room, claiming Mrs. Eleanor was resting, that she didn't want to be disturbed, that the doctor had recommended limited contact to preserve her fragile health. Beatrice tried to talk to Ryan a few times, but he always defended his wife, saying she was just taking good care of his mother, that she had the best intentions. One rainy April afternoon, Marlene was cleaning the study on the second floor when she found something that made her heart race. It was a folder of documents, poorly hidden inside a drawer that was supposed to be locked. She looked around, making sure she was alone, and carefully opened it. They were legal papers, contracts, asset transfers, and they all had Ryan's signature, dated within the last few weeks. The documents showed that practically the entire family fortune was being gradually transferred into Veronica's name. Company shares, real estate, bank accounts. Everything was being concentrated in her hands, under the guise of fiscal reorganization and estate planning. Ryan had signed everything, probably convinced by arguments that Veronica knew how to weave with mastery. Marlene felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't just about domestic control. It was a meticulously crafted plan to take everything from the Caldwell family, and Mrs. Eleanor, the only person who could legally contest these transfers as a direct heir, was being kept isolated, weakened, and cut off from any possibility of fighting back. That same night, Marlene decided she had to act. She waited until everyone was asleep and quietly went up to Mrs. Eleanor's room. The matriarch was awake, sitting in the only armchair in the stuffy room, looking out the small window at the New York night. When she saw Marlene enter, her eyes filled with tears. "I know what you've come to tell me, dear. I'm not blind. I see what's happening. But what can I do? My son is completely under that woman's spell. If I say anything against her, he'll just pull further away from me. I'm already practically invisible in this house I built with so much love." Marlene knelt beside the armchair, holding the matriarch's wrinkled, cold hands. "Mrs. Eleanor, I found documents today. Serious things. She's not just pushing you out of this house. She's taking everything from the family. Ryan is signing papers without even realizing what he's doing. And I don't think she's going to stop there." The two women looked at each other in a silence heavy with mutual understanding. Mrs. Eleanor sighed deeply, a mix of resignation and determination dawning in her tired eyes. "I need you to help me, Marlene. I need to gather proof of what's happening. I can't let that woman destroy everything my late husband built. I can't let Ryan lose everything because of blind infatuation." Marlene nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility she was taking on. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, that Veronica was manipulative and likely dangerous when crossed, but she couldn't just stand by and watch the family she loved be destroyed before her eyes. From that moment on, Marlene began to watch everything much more closely. She noticed that Veronica spent long hours on the phone when Ryan wasn't home, always locked in the study or her bedroom. She spoke quietly, but sometimes her voice would rise in irritation or excitement. Marlene started paying attention to the times of these calls, the days they happened most frequently. She also began photographing documents whenever she had the chance. She used the old smartphone Sophia had given her for Christmas, struggling to learn how to take clear pictures of the papers. Each document she found was more alarming than the last. There were records of offshore bank accounts, correspondence with lawyers specializing in inheritances, even drafts of wills that exclusively favored Veronica. 2 weeks after that late-night conversation, something happened that confirmed all their suspicions. Sophia, the little 6-year-old granddaughter, came running up to the kitchen where Marlene was preparing dinner. The girl was frightened, her eyes wide and her voice trembling. "Aunt Marlene, Aunt Veronica was on the phone and I heard weird things. She was talking about Grandma Eleanor and about a man named Rick. She said that soon, very soon, everything would be ready and that Grandma wouldn't be in the way anymore." Marlene felt her stomach turn. She knelt down to the girl's level, holding her shoulders gently. "Sophia, honey, this is very important. Can you tell me exactly what you heard? Every word you can remember?" The girl, with the sharp memory of children, repeated entire snippets of the conversation she had overheard while hiding behind the library door. Veronica was talking to someone about deadlines, about documents that needed to be signed before it was too late, about a trip Ryan would be taking soon. That would be the perfect opportunity to resolve pending issues. And she mentioned something about Mrs. Eleanor needing to leave the house for good, one way or another. Marlene felt a shiver. She had to act fast, but she knew she couldn't do it alone. She needed allies, people who would believe her and who had the power to confront Veronica. Beatrice was the obvious choice. The younger Caldwell daughter had always been sharp and brave, and she was growing increasingly suspicious of her sister-in-law's intentions. That same afternoon, Marlene called Beatrice using the kitchen landline, one of the few places where she still had some privacy. They arranged a discreet meeting at a coffee shop a few blocks from the mansion, away from prying eyes. Beatrice arrived on time, dressed simply, her brown hair tied back in a ponytail. She barely waited for Marlene to sit down before firing off questions. "What's going on, Marlene? Am I going crazy? I feel like something is very wrong in that house, but Ryan treats me like I'm being paranoid. He says I'm jealous of Veronica, that I can't accept his happiness." Marlene took a deep breath and began to tell her everything. The documents she'd found, the conversations she'd overheard, the progressive isolation of Mrs. Eleanor, the strange changes in the house's routine, Veronica's mysterious phone calls, what Sophia had heard. Beatrice listened with her eyes growing wider and wider, her cup of coffee cooling on the table untouched. "We have to do something, Marlene, but we have to be smart. Veronica is clever and manipulative. If we confront her directly without solid proof, she'll turn it all against us and convince Ryan that we're the villains. We need to gather irrefutable evidence, and above all, we need to protect my mother." The two women devised a plan right there, whispering over their coffee cups as the New York afternoon began to darken. Beatrice would use her contacts to investigate Veronica's past, to find out where she really came from, who she was before she appeared in Ryan's life. Marlene would continue to document everything happening inside the mansion, gathering physical evidence that could be presented when the time came. But most importantly, they needed to ensure Mrs. Eleanor's safety. The matriarch was becoming increasingly frail, and there was a growing sense of urgency in the air, as if something definitive was about to happen. 3 days after that meeting, Ryan announced he was taking a business trip to Chicago. He would be gone for a whole week, dealing with matters related to the expansion of one of the family's companies. Veronica saw him off with kisses and hugs at the mansion's door, waving with a perfect smile as the car pulled away down the tree-lined street. As soon as the vehicle was out of sight, Veronica's smile vanished as if it had never existed. She turned sharply and went back into the house, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floors. Marlene, watching discreetly from the kitchen window, felt a shiver. She knew something was about to happen. That same night, she heard Veronica making a call from the study. Marlene quietly climbed the stairs, positioning herself just outside the slightly ajar door. Veronica's voice was different, lacking the sweet, gentle tone she used with Ryan. It was sharp, authoritarian, impatient. "Rick, we need to speed things up. Ryan's going to be gone all week. This is our chance. I have almost all the documents signed. All that's left is to deal with the old woman. I found a perfect place, a discreet facility where no one will ask questions. Once she's out of here, there's no turning back. Without her around, I can finalize the last transfers, and in 6 months we're free. Rich and free, baby." Marlene had to grab the doorframe to keep from stumbling. So it was true. There was an accomplice, someone with whom Veronica shared not only her plans, but also an intimacy that was a complete betrayal of Ryan. And they were planning to remove Mrs. Eleanor from the house, probably to some place where she would be completely isolated and voiceless. The housekeeper went down the stairs as quietly as possible and went straight to the room on the 3rd floor. Mrs. Eleanor was still awake, her eyes showing that she too felt the tension in the air. When Marlene told her what she had heard, the matriarch closed her eyes for a long moment, taking a deep breath. "She's going to take me away, isn't she? She's going to put me somewhere I can't talk to Ryan, can't tell anyone what's happening. And after I'm gone, she'll finish taking everything that's ours." Marlene held the hands of the woman she loved like a mother. "I won't let that happen, Mrs. Eleanor. I swear on my life I won't let it. Beatrice is investigating. Sophia is helping us find things out. We'll find a way to open Ryan's eyes before it's too late." But they both knew that time was running out. Veronica had accelerated her plans, and now, with Ryan out of town, there was nothing to stop her from acting. The mansion on the Upper East Side, once a symbol of warmth and family love, had become a silent battlefield where a war was being waged for the future of an entire dynasty. And Marlene, the loyal housekeeper, who had dedicated 20 years of her life to that family, was now on the front lines of this battle, carrying on her shoulders the weight of protecting not only Mrs. Eleanor, but the entire legacy of the Caldwells against a woman who would not hesitate to destroy everything and everyone to get what she wanted. The rain began to fall over New York again that night, drumming against the old windows of the mansion. Marlene stayed up late, sitting in the dark kitchen, watching the shadows dance on the walls. She knew the next few days would be decisive. Either they would manage to unmask Veronica in time, or they would lose everything. The next morning arrived with a grey sky typical of a New York autumn. Marlene woke up early, as she always did, but this time her body felt heavier than usual. She had barely slept, tormented by thoughts of what Veronica planned to do with Mrs. Eleanor. As she prepared coffee in the silent kitchen, her fingers trembled slightly as she handled the Italian coffee maker that had been in the family for decades. The phone rang at 8 in the morning. It was Beatrice, her voice tense but controlled. "Marlene, I need you to come to my apartment. I've found some things you need to see in person. Can you make an excuse to leave? Say you're going to the grocery store or the pharmacy." Marlene agreed immediately. She went up to Mrs. Eleanor's room to let her know, finding the matriarch sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing a faded robe that no longer had the elegance of her former attire. The woman seemed to have aged 10 years in just a few months, her white hair disheveled, deep dark circles marking the face that once radiated vitality. "I'm going to meet with Beatrice. She's found something important. Don't worry. I won't be long, okay?" Mrs. Eleanor held Marlene's hand with surprising strength. "Be careful, dear. That woman is dangerous. I feel it in my gut. If she finds out you're investigating, I don't know what she's capable of." Marlene nodded, squeezing the wrinkled hand back. Then she went downstairs, trying not to make a sound. Veronica was still in her room, probably on the phone with that Rick, planning the next steps of her macabre plan. The housekeeper grabbed her purse, left through the back door, and walked quickly through the neighborhood's tree-lined streets to catch a bus that would take her to Beatrice's apartment in the West Village. Beatrice's apartment was modern and cozy, tastefully decorated and filled with photos of Sophia in frames scattered everywhere. When Marlene entered, she found the Caldwell daughter sitting at the living room table, surrounded by papers, printouts from websites, and an open laptop displaying multiple browser tabs. "Sit down." "Marlene, what I've found is much worse than we imagined." Beatrice began to show her the results of her investigation. She had hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a lawyer friend. The man had dug into Veronica's past and uncovered alarming information. Ryan's young wife was not who she claimed to be. Her real name wasn't even Veronica. She had changed her identity 3 years earlier, completely erasing any trace of her previous life. Before that, her name was Vanessa Clark, and she had grown up in a small town in upstate New York. But the most disturbing part was that she had a history of getting involved with older, financially established men. There were records of at least 2 previous relationships that ended suspiciously, with the men losing large amounts of money and assets before the breakups. In one case they discovered, the man had nearly lost his family business after signing a series of documents that transferred properties and shares. He only avoided losing everything because his sister, a lawyer, noticed the fraud in time and managed to legally reverse some of the transactions. But the emotional damage was devastating. The man never fully recovered from the betrayal. Marlene listened with a heavy heart, but the worst was yet to come. Beatrice opened a folder with printed photos. They were images of Veronica with another man, clearly in intimate situations. The photos had been taken in recent weeks, while she was married to Ryan. The man in the photos was dark-haired, tall, with an elegant appearance, but something in his eyes that conveyed danger. "This is Rick Peterson." The PI managed to identify him. "He has an even darker past than Veronica. There are records of involvement in financial fraud, relationship scams, even accusations that were never pursued due to lack of evidence. They're a team, Marlene. They do this together. They pick wealthy, emotionally vulnerable men and systematically destroy them." Marlene felt nauseous. Ryan, the good, honest man she had watched grow up since he was just a boy dedicated to his studies, was being manipulated by 2 professional criminals. And Mrs. Eleanor, The woman who had dedicated her entire life to that family was being used as an obstacle that needed to be removed for the plan to work perfectly. "There's more," Beatrice said, her voice breaking slightly. "The PI found out they're already planning an international trip. They bought tickets to the Cayman Islands under the names of shell companies. They plan to flee the country as soon as they can transfer all the family's money. And according to the timeline the PI found, that should happen in the next 2 weeks." The two women looked at each other, sharing the same terrifying thought. They had to act immediately. There was no more time to slowly gather evidence. Veronica and Rick were accelerating their plans, and if they managed to remove Mrs. Eleanor from the mansion and finalize the last financial transfers, before Ryan returned from his trip, it would be too late. "I'm going to confront my brother as soon as he gets back," Beatrice said with determination. "I'll show him all this evidence. I'll force him to open his eyes even if he doesn't want to. But we need to make sure Mom is safe until then. We can't let Veronica take her anywhere." Marlene agreed, but they both knew it would be difficult. Veronica had total control over the mansion, and Ryan, completely blinded by manipulated passion, had given her legal authority over many household decisions, including Mrs. Eleanor's healthcare. If Veronica decided her mother-in-law needed specialized care in a facility, she technically had the authority to make that decision. "I have an idea," Marlene said after a moment of thought. "I'll install hidden cameras in the house. Small ones, the kind that connect to a phone. Sophia showed me how they work once. If we can record Veronica talking about her plans, or better yet, meeting with this Rick, we'll have definitive proof." Beatrice nodded, already grabbing her phone to order the equipment. "Great. I'll buy the cameras today and get them to you. But Marlene, you have to be very careful. If Veronica finds out what you're doing, it could be dangerous. That woman won't hesitate to harm you if she feels threatened." Marlene returned to the mansion carrying grocery bags as an alibi. When she entered through the back door, she found Veronica in the kitchen, which was unusual since she rarely frequented that space. Ryan's wife was leaning against the counter, her arms crossed, a cold expression on her usually angelic face. "You were at the store for quite a while, weren't you, Marlene? I was getting worried. After all, you're not so young anymore. Something could have happened on the streets." The tone was polite, but there was a veiled threat in her words. Marlene forced a smile, showing the bags. "I went to several places looking for those cookies Mrs. Eleanor likes. You know how it is. She's been so frail. I thought a little treat might cheer her up." Veronica pushed off the counter, walking slowly toward Marlene with measured steps. "How sweet of you. But I need you to understand something. The decisions about what my mother-in-law eats or doesn't eat are mine. Ryan has given me full authority over her. Care. So next time, before you go out buying things, ask first. Got it?" Marlene just nodded, feeling her heart race. Veronica continued to stare at her for a few more seconds before turning and leaving the kitchen, her heels echoing down the hallway. The housekeeper waited until she was sure she was alone to release the breath she had been holding. The situation was becoming increasingly tense. That afternoon, Sophia came for a visit. The girl was with her mother, who made up some excuse about her daughter having forgotten a toy at her grandmother's house. While Beatrice distracted Veronica with a forced conversation about decor, Sophia ran to the kitchen where Marlene was waiting. The girl carried a small bag with the tiny cameras Beatrice had bought. "Aunt Marlene, Mommy said this will help protect Grandma. She explained where you need to put each one. Do you want me to show you?" Marlene smiled, touched by the courage of this small child who was already so aware of the gravity of the situation. The two spent the next few minutes studying the devices, with Sophia explaining in her childish but surprisingly clear voice how to activate them, how to connect them to Marlene's phone, and how to check the recordings. After Beatrice and Sophia left, Marlene waited for nightfall to install the cameras. She placed one in the hallway leading to the study, another in the study itself hidden behind a decorative vase, a third in the living room where Veronica often made her phone calls. The last one went in the hallway near Mrs. Eleanor's room to record any suspicious movement in that area. The next 2 days were a period of intense surveillance. Marlene checked the recordings whenever she had a chance, using her phone hidden in her small staff room. The footage mostly showed everyday scenes, but on the second night something important was captured. Veronica was in the study on the phone with Rick. This time the conversation was even more revealing than the previous ones. She talked about specific documents that still needed to be signed, about how she was gradually convincing Ryan to sign everything without him realizing the true extent of the transfers. She mentioned that she had already forged some signatures on less important documents and was confident she could do the same with the final papers if necessary. But the most shocking part was when she said she had contacted a private clinic that accepted elderly patients with an upfront payment and few questions asked. The plan was to take Mrs. Eleanor there under the pretext that she needed specialized medical care. Once admitted, it would be easy to keep her isolated and without communication with the outside world while they finalized the scam. "Baby, in 2 weeks tops, we're free. The old lady will be tucked away safely in the clinic. Ryan will be so busy trying to figure out what happened to the companies that he won't even notice his mother is gone until it's too late, and we'll be in the Cayman Islands enjoying our well-deserved fortune." Marlene felt her hands tremble as she held the phone. She had to show this to Beatrice immediately, but before she could do anything, she heard footsteps in the hallway. She quickly hid the phone and pretended to be organizing clothes when Veronica opened her bedroom door without knocking. "Marlene, we need to talk. Come with me to the study, please." It wasn't a request, it was an order. The housekeeper felt a chill run down her spine, but had no choice but to obey. She followed Veronica to the study on the second floor, each step feeling like she was walking into a trap. When they arrived, Veronica closed the door behind them and sat in the leather armchair that had once belonged to the family's late patriarch. "You know, Marlene, I've noticed some strange things lately. You've been making a lot of calls, leaving several times, spending too much time talking with Mrs. Eleanor and Beatrice. It's making me suspicious. You wouldn't be planning anything against me, would you?" Marlene maintained her composure, though her heart was pounding. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mum. I just do my job as I have for the past 20 years. Veronica rose slowly, circling Marlene like a predator studying its prey. "Look, I know you have a special affection for the old woman. I get it, I really do. But you need to understand that things have changed. This house has new management, new rules, and those who don't adapt, well, it becomes difficult for them to stay here." It was the most direct threat Veronica had made so far. Marlene knew she had to be careful. "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Veronica. I just want to continue doing my job in peace." Veronica stopped in front of her, her ice blue eyes piercing Marlene's. "Good. Then let's be very clear. Anything that happens with Mrs. Eleanor from now on is my and Ryan's decision. You have no say in this. If I decide she needs specialized care outside of this house, that's what will happen, and you will not interfere in any way. Are we understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Marlene replied, lowering her eyes in a gesture of submission she did not feel. Veronica smiled, satisfied. "Excellent. You may go." "Oh, and Marlene, be careful. I have eyes everywhere in this house. One wrong move and I'll know." Marlene left the study with her legs shaking. She went straight up to Mrs. Eleanor's room and told her everything that had happened. The matriarch listened in silence, her hands clasped in her lap, trembling slightly. "She's going to take me, isn't she? She's going to lock me up somewhere I can't scream, can't ask for help. And then she'll finish stealing everything that's ours while Ryan has no idea what's happening." "I won't let her," Marlene vowed, kneeling beside the chair, where Mrs. Eleanor was sitting. "We have proof now, videos of her confessing everything. Beatrice will talk to Ryan as soon as he gets back. We just need to hold on for a few more days." But the matriarch seemed resigned, as if she had already accepted her fate. "Marlene, dear, you need to promise me something. If something happens to me, if she manages to take me, you give that evidence to Beatrice. Don't let that woman win. Don't let her destroy everything my husband built." Marlene held the hands of the woman she loved like a mother, tears streaming down her face. "Nothing is going to happen to you. I swear I'll protect you." But the next morning, when Marlene woke up, she realized the situation had accelerated drastically. There was a car parked in front of the mansion, a large white vehicle with the logo of a medical transport company. Veronica was at the door, talking to two men in white coats, gesturing as she explained something. Marlene felt panic seize her. She ran up the stairs to Mrs. Eleanor's room, but when she arrived she found the door locked from the outside. She banged on it, desperately hearing the matriarch's weak voice from the other side. "Marlene, is that you? She locked me in. She said they're coming to get me today, that they're taking me to a clinic." The housekeeper pulled on the handle with all her might, but the door wouldn't budge. She had to think fast. She grabbed her phone and called Beatrice, her voice a desperate whisper. "She's taking your mother now. There's an ambulance here. You have to come quick." Beatrice on the other end of the line was silent for a moment that felt like an eternity. "Stall her, any way you can. I'm leaving now with Sophia. I already called Ryan. He's driving back from Chicago. He should be here in 3 hours. You just have to hold her off until then." Marlene went down the stairs, positioning herself in front of the third-floor door. Veronica came up with the two men, her face a mask of false concern. "Oh, Marlene, good. You're here. Can you help pack Mrs. Eleanor's things? We're taking her to a wonderful clinic where they'll take very good care of her. The doctor recommended specialized care." "No," Marlene said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "She's not going anywhere." Veronica raised an eyebrow, her expression subtly shifting to something more dangerous. "Excuse me? You heard me. Mrs. Eleanor is not leaving this house, not without speaking to Ryan and Beatrice first." The two men exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing something was wrong with the situation. Veronica kept her smile, but her eyes were pure ice. "Marlene, don't make me do something we'll both regret. Step aside. Now." "I'm not moving." Veronica took a step forward, her voice low and threatening. "You're making a huge mistake. When Ryan finds out you tried to prevent his mother from getting medical care, he'll fire you on the spot. He might even sue you. Think very carefully about what you're doing." Marlene knew she was risking everything. Her only source of income, her home, her security. But when she looked at the locked door behind her, where Mrs. Eleanor was trapped and terrified, she knew she had no choice. Some things were more important than personal safety. It was then that she heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Hurried footsteps, the front door opening, and then Beatrice's voice echoing through the house. "Nobody is taking my mother anywhere." Beatrice ran up the stairs with Sophia close behind, her determined eyes fixed on Veronica. Ryan's wife tried to regain her composure, putting her mask of gentle concern back on, but something in the air had changed. The tension was palpable, as if everyone knew the moment of truth had finally arrived. "Beatrice, what a surprise. I didn't know you were coming today, just when I'm trying to take care of our mother. The doctor recommended she go to a specialized clinic. You know how fragile her health has been lately." Beatrice stopped in front of her sister-in-law, her eyes burning with an intensity Marlene had never seen before. "You can send those men away, Veronica. My mother isn't going to any clinic, and you know damn well why." Veronica maintained her smile, but there was an almost imperceptible tremor in her hands. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to do what's best for Mrs. Eleanor." "Are you? Then why is she locked in her room? Why did you hire a clinic that accepts patients with few questions and an upfront payment? Why are you planning a trip to the Cayman Islands in 2 weeks?" Veronica's smile finally vanished. The two men from the ambulance realized they had walked into something complicated and started backing down the stairs quickly, muttering apologies about being called under false pretenses. The front door closed behind them, leaving only the 4 women and little Sophia in the tense third-floor hallway. "I don't know what you're talking about, Beatrice. I think you're having a paranoid episode. Maybe you're the one who needs medical help." "Marlene, show her the videos," Beatrice said without taking her eyes off Veronica. The housekeeper took out her phone with trembling hands and began to play the recordings. Veronica's voice echoed through the hallway, her words confessing the plan to remove Mrs. Eleanor, to finalize the asset transfers, to flee the country with Rick. Ryan's wife turned pale, her eyes widening as she realized the trap she had fallen into. "You can't use that," she stammered, all her confidence evaporating. "That was recorded without my consent. It's not legally admissible." Beatrice took a step forward, her voice as cold as ice. "Maybe it won't hold up in court, but it will certainly mean something to my brother. By the way, he should be here in a few hours. I called him on the road, told him there was an emergency with our mother. He's coming back immediately." Veronica's face contorted in panic. For a few seconds, she looked like a cornered animal, searching for an escape. Then, something in her expression changed. The panic gave way to a calculated coldness. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her hair with her hands, and smiled. But it was a completely different smile than the one she usually wore. It was the smile of someone with nothing left to lose. "You think you're so smart, don't you? The loyal housekeeper and the protective sister, plotting a conspiracy against the poor, misunderstood wife. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You can show those videos to Ryan. You can tell him whatever you want. He's so in love with me. He won't believe you. He'll think you manipulated the recordings, that you're jealous, that you want to destroy our marriage." "Are you so sure about that?" Beatrice asked, crossing her arms. "Absolutely. For the past few months I've been planting seeds in his head. Subtle comments about how you've always been jealous of his success, Beatrice. About how Marlene is emotionally unstable, that she's been forgetting things, confusing situations. About how your mother is getting senile and can't trust her own thoughts anymore. I've built an entire narrative in his mind. So yes, I'm sure he'll take my side." Marlene felt a chill run down her spine. Veronica's manipulation was even deeper and more systematic than they had imagined. She hadn't just deceived Ryan financially and emotionally, she had preemptively undermined the credibility of everyone close to him. It was a meticulously crafted plan, executed with terrifying coldness. Sophia, who had been quiet until then, stepped forward. Her childish voice broke the tension in the hallway. "But what about the pictures with Uncle Rick? Mommy showed me. You were kissing another man while you're married to Uncle Ryan. Is that a lie too?" Veronica looked at the little girl with an expression that made Marlene instinctively pull Sophia back. There was something deeply disturbing in the woman's eyes at that moment, a darkness she had never shown before. "Children shouldn't meddle in adult affairs," Veronica said in a low, dangerous voice. Beatrice put Sophia behind her. "Don't you talk to my daughter in that tone." "And, yes, about the pictures, we have plenty. You and Rick Peterson in very compromising situations. I also have his record, the fraud, the previous scams. I have documents showing you two have done this before with other men. I have everything, Veronica. Or should I call you Vanessa Clark? That's your real name, isn't it?" For the first time, Veronica seemed genuinely shaken. All the color drained from her face, her hands trembled visibly. "How did you find out?" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that I did, and my brother is going to know everything." Veronica was silent. For a long moment, her brain clearly working to find a way out. Then she sighed, leaning against the hallway wall. Her posture changed completely. Her shoulders slumped. Her expression grew tired, almost vulnerable. "All right," she said in a soft voice. "You win. I'll tell him everything. But can I at least have the dignity of explaining my story, of making Ryan understand why I did what I did?" Beatrice hesitated, suspicious. "You'll get your chance to talk when my brother gets here. Until then, you're staying where I can see you." The next few hours were tense. Beatrice unlocked Mrs. Eleanor's bedroom door and she came out, trembling but relieved. Marlene took her to the kitchen, made her a hot tea, and stayed with her, holding her hands while they waited. Sophia stayed with them, telling stories from school to try to ease the tension that hung in the air. Veronica remained in the living room under Beatrice's watchful eye. She seemed to have resigned herself, sitting in an armchair and staring into space, her fingers drumming nervously on the armrest. Every so often she would reach for her phone as if to make a call, but Beatrice would immediately intervene. "If you're thinking of calling Rick to tell him the plan failed, forget it. Your phone isn't leaving this room." Veronica just smiled sadly. "I wasn't going to call him. I was going to call someone you don't know. Someone who needs to know that I failed." When Ryan finally arrived, it was mid-afternoon. He walked through the front door in his travel-wrinkled suit, his hair disheveled, his eyes worried. Beatrice had only said there was an emergency with their mother, so he was expecting to find Mrs. Eleanor sick or injured. He was not expecting to find the entire family gathered in a courtroom-like atmosphere. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking around in confusion. "Beatrice, you said it was urgent, that Mom was sick." "She's fine now," Beatrice answered calmly, "but only because we managed to stop your wife from taking her to a private clinic where she would have been isolated and cut off from the world." Ryan looked at Veronica, who remained seated in the armchair, then back at his sister. "What are you talking about? Why would Veronica take Mom to a clinic?" "Because she needs Mom to disappear, Ryan. She needs her. To be unable to contest the asset transfers you've been signing for the past few months, transfers that are putting practically the entire family fortune in her name." "That's ridiculous," Ryan snapped, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Veronica was just helping me reorganize our investments. It's a normal fiscal restructuring." Beatrice picked up a folder from the coffee table. "Ryan, sit down. You need to see some things." For the next 45 minutes, Beatrice showed her brother everything. The documents Marlene had photographed, the audio and video recordings, Veronica's history as revealed by the private investigator, the photos of her with Rick, the records of previous scams, the tickets purchased for the Cayman Islands. Each piece of evidence was a stab to Ryan's trust. Marlene watched from a distance, her heart breaking as she saw the transformation on the man's face. Confusion gave way to disbelief, which gave way to pain, which finally morphed into something between fury and devastation. When Beatrice finished showing him everything, Ryan was silent for several long minutes, his eyes fixed on the documents spread across the table. Finally, he turned to Veronica. "Is it true? Is all of this true?" Veronica looked at him for a moment, and Marlene saw something strange in her expression. It almost looked as if there were genuine tears in her eyes. "It's not as simple as they're making it seem, Ryan." "Then explain it," he said in a hoarse voice. "Explain to me how it's not simple to steal everything from my family. Explain to me how it's not simple to cheat on me with another man. Explain to me how it's not simple to try and lock my mother away." Veronica took a deep breath, wiping away the tears that streamed down her face. "You want the truth? The real truth? Fine. I'll tell you." And then she began to speak. She told him about growing up in a small town, in a destitute family, where her father drank, and her mother had abandoned her and her younger sister when they were children. She told him how at 15 she was approached by Rick, who was 23 at the time, and seemed sophisticated and charming, how he had seduced her with promises of a better life, of wealth, of freedom. But Rick was not the Prince Charming he claimed to be. He was a manipulator, a criminal who had built an elaborate scheme. He seduced young, vulnerable women, molding them into his perfect tools for marriage scams. And when Veronica tried to leave, he kidnapped her younger sister. She's been with him for 10 years, Ryan. My sister. She was only 8 when he took her. He uses her as collateral. He forces me to pull these scams, to seduce rich men, to steal fortunes, because if I don't, he hurts my sister. He's sent me pictures of her, bruised, when I've questioned him. I've been trapped in this life for over a decade. The silence that followed was absolute. No one had expected this revelation. Marlene felt her heart ache, torn between compassion for the terrible story and anger for what Veronica had done. Ryan stared at his wife with a mixture of shock and pain. "Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. I could have called the police, rescued your sister." Veronica laughed humorlessly. "You think I didn't think of that? Rick has contacts everywhere. I've tried to involve the authorities before. He always finds out. And he always makes my sister pay for it. The last time I tried, she went 3 days without food as punishment. I can't risk her life again." Beatrice, who had been quiet, finally spoke. "Where is she? Your sister? If you tell us where Rick is keeping her, we can do something. I have contacts. We can involve the police in a way that he won't find out until it's too late." Veronica looked at Beatrice with an expression of desperate hope. "You would do that, even after everything I've done?" Beatrice exchanged glances with her mother and Marlene. Mrs. Eleanor nodded slowly. "If there's a child in danger, then yes, we'll help. But you have to cooperate completely. You need to tell us everything." And so Veronica began to reveal every detail of Rick's scheme. The addresses where he kept her sister, always moving her every few months. The fake names he used. The bank accounts where he deposited the money from the scams. The contacts he had with corrupt people in various institutions. With every piece of information revealed, the scheme seemed more elaborate and terrifying. Beatrice picked up the phone and made a call. She had a friend from college who now worked for the FBI, someone she trusted completely. She explained the situation, and 2 hours later, 2 federal agents were at the mansion, taking Veronica's full statement. The operation to rescue her sister was planned carefully. Rick was in a rented apartment in Queens, keeping the 18-year-old girl in a locked room. He thought everything was under control, that Veronica was following the plan as usual. He had no idea that his entire scheme had collapsed. In the early hours of the next morning, the police raided the apartment. Rick tried to resist but was quickly subdued. Veronica's sister, a young woman with frightened eyes and a body that was far too thin, was rescued. She was traumatized but alive. When they brought Rick to the station, they began to unearth an even darker history. He hadn't just committed financial fraud. There were more serious cases in his past, situations the police hadn't been able to prove before, but that now, with Veronica's testimony and the gathered evidence, were starting to connect. The man would be tried for multiple serious crimes. Veronica was arrested too, but because she cooperated fully with the authorities and had been coerced for years, her lawyer managed to secure a plea deal. She would testify against Rick in exchange for a reduced sentence. She would have to serve time, but there would be a possibility of parole eventually. The last time Marlene saw her, before she was taken away to await trial, Veronica asked to speak with Ryan. He agreed, though he was visibly shaken. The two spoke alone for a few minutes. No one knew exactly what was said, but when Ryan came out, there were tears in his eyes. She apologized, Ryan later told the assembled family. She said that in another life, under different circumstances, maybe they could have been truly happy. That part of the feelings she showed were real, but she was so caught in Rick's web that she couldn't be honest. She thanked us for saving her sister. Mrs. Eleanor, who had reclaimed her rightful place in the house and was visibly stronger, held her son's hand. "You have a heart that's too good for this world, my son, but now you need to focus on healing. What happened was a profound betrayal, but it was also a liberation. Rick was the real monster in this story." The following months were a time of rebuilding. Ryan threw himself into therapy, working through the trauma of betrayal and manipulation. Slowly, he began to understand the signs he had ignored, the moments he had chosen to believe comfortable lies over painful truths. It was a difficult process, but he had the unwavering support of his family. The asset transfers were reversed with the help of specialized lawyers. The Caldwell fortune was protected. Mrs. Eleanor moved back into her suite on the second floor, and the house gradually regained the warmth it had lost during Veronica's reign. Marlene continued her work, but now with the renewed gratitude of the entire family. Ryan publicly acknowledged that without her and Beatrice's courage, everything would have been lost. Sophia continued to visit the house regularly, always running to hug Marlene and call her auntie, saying that when she grew up, she wanted to be strong and brave like her. As for Veronica's sister, she was taken in by an organization specializing in victims of trafficking and coercion. She was receiving psychological help and slowly rebuilding her life, finally free from the prison that had been her reality for 10 years. Veronica, even in prison, found some peace in knowing her sister was safe. 6 months had passed since that tense afternoon in the Caldwell mansion. The New York winter had arrived with its cold mornings and gray skies, but inside the house on the Upper East Side, a different kind of warmth had been rekindled. It was the warmth of a family that had faced the most devastating storm of their lives and managed to emerge on the other side, wounded but intact, broken but rebuilt. Marlene woke up every morning with a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time: peace. The household routine had returned to its natural flow, free from the constant tensions that had marked Veronica's time there. Mrs. Eleanor was renewed, her smile gradually returning, her vitality re-emerging like a plant finally receiving sunlight after a long winter in the shade. The matriarch had resumed her role as the heart of the family. Her suite on the second floor was once again decorated with her personal belongings, her portraits, her memories. The mornings were marked by the aroma of fresh coffee that she insisted on having in the dining room, no longer hidden away in a stuffy little room on the third floor. She would walk through the garden with Sophia, teaching her granddaughter about the flowers she herself had planted decades ago. Ryan was the one who had changed the most visibly. The man who had always been confident and self-assured had undergone a profound transformation. Veronica's betrayal had shaken his foundations, forcing him to question his own judgment, his ability to truly see people. The first few months were the hardest. He would isolate himself in his study for hours, reviewing documents, trying to understand how he had been so blind. It was Mrs. Eleanor who pulled him out of that spiral of self-blame. One afternoon she walked into the study without knocking and sat in the armchair across from her son's desk. "Ryan, you can't keep punishing yourself forever for what happened. That woman was a professional manipulator, trained for years by an experienced criminal. She deceived you because that's exactly what she did best. But I should have seen the signs, Mom. You saw them. Beatrice saw them. Even Marlene saw them. I was the only one stupid enough not to notice." Mrs. Eleanor leaned forward, holding her son's face in her hands. "You weren't stupid, you fell in love. And love, my son, makes us vulnerable. It makes us want to believe the best in people. That's not a weakness, it's humanity. What you need to learn isn't to distrust everyone, but to balance your heart with your reason. To listen when the people who love you point out things you don't want to see." That conversation marked a turning point for Ryan. He began to engage more committedly in therapy, working not only on the trauma of the betrayal, but also on behavioral patterns that made him vulnerable to manipulation. He learned to set boundaries, to question, to not lose himself completely in relationships. It was a painful but necessary process. Rick Peterson's trial took place in August, bringing to light a story even darker than anyone had imagined. The prosecutor presented evidence of at least 6 different cases where Rick had used young women to run elaborate scams on wealthy men. Some of these women had also been coerced, like Veronica, through threats to their families. Others were simply deceived and manipulated until they became willing tools in his schemes. Marlene was present in the courtroom the day Rick was sentenced. She wanted to see with her own eyes the man who had caused so much suffering finally being held accountable. Rick showed no remorse throughout the trial. He maintained a cold, calculated expression, as if it were all just a temporary inconvenience. But when the judge read the sentence of 35 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 25, something in his face changed. For the first time, he seemed to truly understand that his reign of terror was over. Veronica's trial was different. She had cooperated fully with the authorities, providing detailed information on all of Rick's schemes, helping to identify other victims and revealing hidden bank accounts and illegally acquired assets. Her lawyer argued eloquently about the years of coercion she had suffered, about how she had been a victim since she was a teenager, about the rescue of her sister, and her willingness to do whatever was necessary to right her wrongs. Ryan was called to testify. Marlene saw the pain in his eyes as he took the stand. The prosecutor asked if he felt he had been manipulated, if he recognized the damage caused. Ryan took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, I was manipulated. Yes, my family. Almost lost everything because of her actions. But I also recognize that she was trapped in an impossible situation. No one should have to choose between the life of a loved one and doing the right thing. Rick Peterson is the real criminal here. She was both a victim and a perpetrator. And for what it's worth, I believe she deserves a chance to rebuild her life, just as we are all trying to rebuild ours." Ryan's testimony was decisive. The judge considered all the mitigating factors and sentenced Veronica to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole. After 5, provided she maintained good behavior and continued to cooperate with investigations related to Rick's crimes. It wasn't freedom, but it was hope. Before being taken away to begin her sentence, Veronica asked for permission to speak one last time. The judge granted it. She stood up, looking directly at where the Caldwell family was seated. "There are not enough words to express how sorry I am for what I did. Ryan, you didn't deserve what I caused. Mrs. Eleanor, Beatrice, Marlene, Sophia, all of you were nothing but kind to me, and I repaid you with betrayal. But I want you to know that in these last few months in jail, for the first time in over a decade, I've been able to sleep peacefully. Because my sister is safe. because Rick is where he belongs. And because, despite everything, you chose to see my humanity instead of just my crimes. I will spend the next few years trying to become the person you saw in me, even when I couldn't see it in myself." Many months after the trials, life in the mansion found a new rhythm. Ryan returned to the family business with renewed focus, but now with a better balance. He no longer worked late every night. He made a point of having regular dinners with his mother and sister. He started spending more time in the garden where Sophia played, truly present, instead of just physically there, but mentally absent. Beatrice was also thriving. Her law firm was growing, and she specialized in cases of fraud and coercion, using her personal experience to help other victims. Sophia, now 7, was a bright and compassionate child who understood that her family had been through something difficult, but had come out stronger. But perhaps the most significant transformation was in how the family saw Marlene. For 20 years, she had been a constant presence, always there, always working quietly in the background. But now, after everything she had done, how she had risked her own livelihood to protect Mrs. Eleanor, how she had been instrumental in unmasking the scheme, she was seen in a completely different light. One September afternoon, as the New York spring began to warm the air, Ryan called Marlene for a chat in the study. She went up the stairs with some apprehension, memories still fresh of the tense conversations she'd had, there with Veronica. But when she entered, she found not just Ryan, but the entire family gathered. Mrs. Eleanor, Beatrice, and even Sophia were there. "Marlene, please sit down," Ryan said, gesturing to the main armchair, the one always reserved for the patriarch of the family. She hesitated, but Mrs. Eleanor nodded encouragingly. When everyone was settled, Ryan began to speak. "Marlene, you've worked for this family for 20 years, 2 decades of dedication, loyalty, and care. But in the last few months, you were much more than an employee. You were a guardian, a hero, someone who put herself at risk to protect the people she loves, and we wanted to recognize that properly." He pushed an envelope across the desk. Marlene picked it up with trembling hands, slowly opening it. Inside were legal documents. She read the first few lines and felt tears well up in her eyes. It was the deed to a house, a small but beautiful property in a quiet neighborhood in Queens. It was in her name. "Ryan, I can't accept this," she began, but Mrs. Eleanor held up a hand. "Yes, you can, dear. You deserve it. For 20 years, you've lived in a small room out back, always available, always sacrificing your own life for ours. It's time for you to have a place that is truly yours. You can live there, you can rent it out, you can do whatever you want. It's our gift to you for everything you've done for us." The tears were flowing freely down Marlene's face now, but that wasn't all. Beatrice came forward, handing her another envelope. "We also want to make something official," she said. "From now on, you're not just our housekeeper, you're our household manager, with a corresponding salary, full benefits, and the authority to make decisions about the management of the property. We trust you completely." Sophia, who had been quiet until then, jumped out of her chair and ran to hug Marlene. "And you'll still be my favorite auntie, and when I grow up, I want to be strong and brave just like you." Marlene hugged the little girl, unable to speak through the emotion that tightened her throat. 20 years ago, she had arrived at that house as a scared young woman from Ohio, with nothing but an old suitcase and hope. Now she not only had her own home, but also a family that truly loved her. As the months passed, small signs of healing continued to appear. Ryan started dating again, this time taking things much more slowly and cautiously. He met a psychologist named Juliana at a charity event, a kind and patient woman who wasn't bothered by his slow pace. They were just getting to know each other, no rush, no rash promises, just 2 adults discovering if there was a genuine connection. Mrs. Eleanor became actively involved in the community again, resuming her volunteer work at charities she had abandoned during the dark months. With Veronica, she seemed to have been rejuvenated, her energy renewed by the knowledge that she still had much to offer the world. The house itself underwent a transformation. Ryan hired decorators to remove all traces of Veronica's era. The impersonal furniture was replaced with pieces that combined comfort and family history. The abstract paintings no one understood gave way to new family portraits, including, for the first time, a few photos of Marlene. She was now officially part of the family portrait. A letter arrived about a year after the trials. It was from Veronica, from prison. She wrote, asking for permission to correspond with her sister through Marlene, as the girl was under the temporary guardianship of a protection agency. Veronica also wrote about her routine in prison, about the work she was doing with a psychologist to understand the trauma she had suffered and the damage she had caused. The family gathered to decide if they should respond. It was Mrs. Eleanor who gave the final verdict. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. If she is genuinely trying to be better, we can at least acknowledge that. But with caution, and through appropriate channels. Marlene became the liaison. She wrote brief but cordial letters to Veronica, updating her on her sister's recovery, who was now in intensive therapy and making remarkable progress. The young woman had started school, was making friends, and slowly rebuilding the childhood that had been stolen from her. Ryan never asked to read Veronica's letters, and Marlene never offered. He had closed that chapter of his life, keeping it as a lesson learned but not a wound that needed to be constantly revisited. He had forgiven in his own way, but forgiving didn't mean forgetting or reopening doors. 2 years after all the drama. On a sunny spring afternoon, the Caldwell family hosted a barbecue in the mansion's garden. It was Sophia's 8th birthday. The little girl ran across the lawn with friends from school, her laughter echoing among the old trees. Mrs. Eleanor sat under an umbrella, chatting animatedly with other ladies from the neighborhood. Beatrice was at the grill helping Ryan, who had unexpectedly discovered a talent for cooking steaks. Juliana was there too, holding hands with Ryan, naturally integrated into the family. She chatted with Marlene about the garden flowers, genuinely interested in the history of each flower bed. There was no rush in her relationship with Ryan, no pressure, just a healthy, organic growth of affection between two people who had lived enough to value authenticity over overwhelming passion. In a quiet moment that afternoon, Marlene stepped away from the group and walked to the edge of the garden where a wooden bench sat under a century-old oak tree. She sat there, observing the scene before her. The family she loved, gathered, happy, safe. Children playing, adults talking, the sound of laughter floating on the air. She thought about her journey. 22 years ago, she was a scared young woman, arriving in New York with nothing. Now at 54, she had a home, a respected career, a family that saw her as an equal. She had dignity, security, love. She had faced one of the most dangerous situations of her life and emerged not just intact, but strengthened. Aunt Marlene, Sophia's voice pulled her from her thoughts. The girl was running toward her, holding a piece of cake. I saved the biggest piece for you because you're the bravest person I know. Marlene took the cake and pulled Sophia into a hug. Thank you, sweetie, but you know what? Real courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid but doing the right thing anyway. And you've already shown you have that courage too. Remember when you told your mom about the conversation you heard? That was very brave. Sophia thought about it for a moment, then smiled brightly. Then we're all brave. You, me, Mommy, Grandma, Uncle Ryan. We're a family of superheroes. Marlene laughed, a genuine, joyful laugh that came from the bottom of her heart. Yes, we are, Sophia, yes, we are. As the sun began to set, painting the New York sky with shades of orange and pink, the family was still gathered in the garden. Mrs. Eleanor began telling stories of the past, of when the mansion was built, of when her children were little, of legendary parties that had taken place in those gardens decades ago. The new stories mixed with the old, weaving a continuous tapestry of memory and hope. Ryan looked around, taking in the scene. His mother, healthy and happy, his sister, radiant, his niece, growing up surrounded by love, Juliana by his side, a calm and steady presence, and Marlene, the woman who had saved everything, finally receiving the recognition she had always deserved. He had almost lost all of this because of his blindness, but he had also learned lessons that would make him stronger for the rest of his life. As night fell, people began to say their goodbyes. The neighbors left, thanking them for the wonderful afternoon. Sophia's friends were picked up by their parents. Soon, only the close family remained. They sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the encroaching night chill, just enjoying each other's company. It was Mrs. Eleanor who broke the comfortable silence. "You know," she said softly, looking at each of them, "I've lived through a lot in this life. I've seen joy and sorrow. I built a family, lost a beloved husband, and almost lost everything all over again. But if this terrible experience taught me anything, it's that true wealth isn't property. It's not bank accounts. It's this. It's you. It's this love we share. It's the courage we show when all seems lost. It's the loyalty that remains even in the darkest hours." She took Marlene's hand and Ryan's, joining the small family in a symbolic circle. "We are stronger now than we were before because we were tested and we did not break. We bent, yes, we nearly shattered, but here we are together, whole in a way we might not have been before." Marlene squeezed Mrs. Eleanor's hand, feeling hot tears stream down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me, for listening to me, for trusting me." "No," Mrs. Eleanor replied firmly. "Thank you for your courage, for your loyalty, for your strength. You saved this family, Marlene. Never forget that." The night deepened around them, the stars beginning to appear in the New York sky, rare but present. The mansion on the Upper East Side, which had been the stage for so much manipulation and pain, now resonated once again with love and truth. The shadows had been cast out, the light had returned. And Marlene, the loyal housekeeper who became a guardian, the silent woman who found her voice, the unlikely hero who saved everything, finally allowed herself to believe something that had always seemed impossible, that she was exactly where she belonged, loved for exactly who she was, valued not for what she did but for who she was. The story of the Caldwell family didn't end that night. It would continue for many years, with new chapters of joy and challenge, growth and change. But the dark chapter had definitively closed, and the new chapter, written with the lessons learned and the strength found in adversity, promised to be the brightest of all. Because in the end, it's not the storms that define who we are. It's how we navigate through them, who we choose to be when all is lost, and what kind of world we build when we finally reach the other shore.